Okay, working on it.
We're working on it. He's just writing down the bar lines, though. We need to get your manuscript right there. His manuscript page is in the
Technically, this is Bryan Beller. This is 7 hours. Is why I don't do it. We're doing this. It's okay.
Now you, Mike?
Okay.
Good. What's happening? Thought I was gonna be the Brian that was late.
Jesus, you're Swift?
Yeah, I just ran about 10 blocks.
Hey, that's a cool thing. I look at it.
What's that? Oh yeah, man. When I used to play all the time. Even back in college, yeah. That's like one of the strokes.
Not that I hate my fingers.
You have to do it like this.
What are you doing?
It's called the snap technique. Still growing. Where's Sean? There he is. Oh, I promised I was gonna do, but I don't know if I have the voice for it. I have to do it off and lower.
Well, you don't have to keep going. And Brian, say do it too.
Yeah. What's this? The middle section of Montana. Can you sing harmony? Yeah, right. What are the words?
I didn't think you would actually sing it.
Okay, Mark and I can sing.
It wasn't harmony.
No, but just, you do it in the octave lower.
Okay.
It'll be like squeeze.
Okay.
Ready? 3, 4. You know the triplets. All right, take it away, Bryan Beller.
Yeah, okay, let's start. There you go. Okay.
Welcome to this cozy little clinic here in Westchester, Pennsylvania. This is cool. Thanks, Westchester Music, Dave, and we have also Charlie Turner here, the manufacturer out from Los Angeles, all the way to Westchester, Pennsylvania.
He ran here today.
Yes, right. Did. Yeah, he had time to shower. My name is Bryan Beller. This room over here. Ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is fast. This demo. Is your implements ready? Crazy man, crazy things. Give me all you got to let the radio sing. I would drive a million miles today. So get rejected, but I wanna play. I can see you weren't away. Doing what they meant to. Look at that over there in the decision chair with all the money in the glassy stare. I'll continue on my zigzag course, keeping on my enemies where I can see. One day I'll raise a glass in there. Oh yeah, call up, come. I can't stop. I'm a drop. I can't stop. I'll be too. This woman I'll be to the point. Sooner or later there will come a time where I can raise my hand above the sun. I'll take a deep long breath and feel like I'm around. And then over there in the decision chair with all the money and the glassy stare. I hope to God I don't become like him. Will I remember how I felt when I wrote this? I remember singing this with my brain on. Call a cab. I can't stop. I'm a drop. I can't stop.
Yeah.
So, how did I become involved with SWR? Back in 1989, when I was a wee 18-year-old freshman at Berklee College of Music, I had my Brand X amplifier in my Brand Y cabinet, and I was tooling around in the little halls of Berklee, and there's ensemble rooms all over the place, and everyone's got a different amp, and every piece of gear that you've ever seen in your life, someone has it at this school. And I was fairly happy with what I had. I mean, it was better than anything I'd had before I'd gone to Berklee. My parents were nice enough to go to a music store and say, "Here, why don't you have this? Why don't you have this?" And I was like, "Okay, that's really great." And I brought it there, and I was happy until I walked into an ensemble room where someone was using one of these, an SM400S. And while I was happy with what I had, one, it had a solid-state preamp, whereas this has a tube preamp, Groove 212AX7A in there. But more important than that, it just, for some reason, it sounded exactly, my instrument that I was using stopped sounding like a piece of electronics and hardware and started sounding like a piece of wood once I plugged it into there. It just sounded exactly the way it sounded when nothing was plugged into it, and I was listening to it in my room, except that sound was amplified as opposed to it being colored in some unnatural way. And I'm not a gearhead, but all of a sudden, when I sat down and listened to that, I realized that it was one of those things where, okay, my life was going to be incomplete until I owned this amplifier. So I took the amplifier that I had for about a month and a half to 2 months and sold it and took a ridiculous bath on it so that I could get this. And then I was happy for a little while. I went around with this in the Brand Y cabinet and was doing my rehearsals and ensembles at Berklee, and I started running into this strange problem where my speaker cabinet's speakers weren't really sounding that good anymore. And they sounded good when I got the speaker cabinet, they sounded good when I was using the other amp with it, but all of a sudden they didn't quite sound like they were doing the trick. And I was like, I wonder why that is. And I discovered that I had a couple of blown speakers, and I talked to a couple of people about it, and what I discovered was that this amp was reproducing frequencies down to 20 hertz more accurately than the speaker cabinet could deal with. And you ought to be able to do this and not have to worry about blowing your speakers every single time you go down that far. So what I ended up doing was taking another bath on that Brand Y cabinet and going out and getting an SWR Goliath 410, which unfortunately they don't have one of those here, but they do have one of these, which is the Goliath 210, and it basically looks just like this, except it's twice as big, and there's 2 more 10-inch speakers down here, and it handles 700 watts, and it made my life absolutely wonderful. That was in 1991, and then I ended up out in Los Angeles playing with Dweezil Zappa. That was in 1993, and that was where I met Mike, and we were in Dweezil's band together. and we needed to go on the road, and I needed to have something that could keep up with Dweezil's ridiculous wall of amplifiers and racks and bells and whistles and what have you. So already having the sound that I wanted, in most situations at this point you'd have to go out and get a bigger head. I mean, I went ahead and I had this head, and it was good. It delivers 400 watts bridged into the Goliath 410, the cabinet that I had, which is cool. But for a really, really big rock show, you're probably going to want a little bit more power than that. And you're going to want 2 speaker cabinets also. The nice thing about this was you can use the mono effects, and there's an effects loop on this. And if you use the mono send, it actually acts as a preamp out. And all you need to do is just slave to another power amp, and then voila, you've got the exact sound that you're looking for with more power into another cabinet. And now you haven't had to go ahead and get rid of this and then go ahead and get a whole new upgraded amplifier. So there was another little added benefit. And then what happened was in 1995, I ended up actually getting an endorsement with SWR. And soon after that, me and Mike Keneally decided that we would have more fun by ourselves as opposed to playing in that band. So we left, and that's how Beer for Dolphins started, essentially. And not too long ago, I actually started working at SWR, where I'm handling some of the artist relations stuff, and I'm a product specialist, and that's what's like this. I'm going around just trying to talk a little bit about the company, which I was interested in long before there was any reason for them to be interested in me. I mean, there's a lot of deals out there where companies will recruit certain players to play their gear because they'll hand them a big check, or they'll hand them a stack of free gear this high, or anything like that. It's not really the way it works with us. We deal with it, and we want to work with people that like the gear first, and then we can talk about that sort of stuff. In my case, I ended up being kind of like, I got the religion at least 5 years before I ended up talking to anybody in the company. And I still feel that when I plug into these things, I can have everything completely flat, and I'm still getting a better sound out of this than I'm getting out of any other amplifier on the market. That's before I even start EQing anything. So that's how I met SWR. Let's play something now. My voice is getting tired.
Okay. Something off Sluggo. What can we play off of Sluggo?
Play Beer.
Okay.
We got a little sound here. Let's play 2 songs.
All right. Let's play Beautiful twice.
All right. Want to do 1988? Sure. Ready?
3, 4.
Polyrhythms. Yeah. Very huge thanks right now to Mike Keneally, who, although SWR does have an acoustic amplifier called the California Blonde, which is a bitchin' little thing which is over in that room over there, Mike is kind of along for the ride on this. Thank you very much for accompanying me and not leaving me here on my own.
No problem.
SWR as a company is basically thought of created and founded by one person who's designed every single product that they've ever made, and his name is Steve Robbie. He started way back. Does anybody remember the amplifier company Acoustic? Okay. He got a job with them in the early 70s, and he worked his way up the company from line technician to sheet repair guy to product designer. And he eventually, by around 1977, 78, he was the guy who was personally in charge of maintaining Jago Pastorius' rig. So the guy, knew what he was doing and had some pretty heavy responsibility, even at a young age. When Acoustic went south in the 80s or in the early 80s, he jumped ship and worked for a couple different amplifier companies before realizing that he was probably better off working by himself, for himself, designing amplifiers that he thought were the most bitchin' thing. So it was around 1983 or 1984 when he first came out with a model called the PB200, which is a predecessor of this. It had the same basic features here. It had, it's got the 4-band graphic equalizer with the 4, you can call them frequency dialers underneath each one. This one booster cuts the lowest of the bass here, and then you can hear, what this does is this selects the frequency that's being boost or cut right underneath each graphic slider. Thank you very much. You can dial in frequencies anywhere from 31 all the way to 160 hertz on this thing. You can hear what's being boost or cut. And they kind of correlate to each string on the bass. This would be from 80 all the way to around 320 or cut. If for some reason you have a frequency that the room is not reacting well with, this kind of correlates to the D string. Pardon the dirty potentiometers. And then this one right here is all the high stuff. So between adjusting the graphics and adjusting the frequency dials on each one of these, you can get almost an infinite possibility of tones. And he started handing them out basically to players around town, most notably Charlie Turner. You there?
Yeah.
There you are. Everybody, Charlie Turner, our factory up out in Los Angeles.
Saving the day.
I believe it was it Freddie Washington that he gave the amp that he used on the We Are the World session. Yeah, I believe it was Freddie Washington who ended up doing Michael Jackson's tour eventually. But Steve, through a rehearsal studio that he knew that Freddie frequented, he handed him one of the earliest models. He said, "Here, man, try it out. See what you think." And he brought it to the session for "We Are the World," that song, and plugged it in. And they used the XLR line out on the back here. There's an XLR out on the back of these amps. And you get the sound of the preamp directly into the board. And I believe it was one of the first, if not the first times that recording technique was ever used with bass. And Freddie was so into it that he started using it all the time, and little by little, players around town started using it. That was kind of how the company got off the ground. It literally started in a garage with Steve himself and one technician helping him assemble. And little by little, they were making 10 amps a month, 20, 30, 40. It was just amplifiers in the beginning, and then the problem that I told you about in the beginning, where the amplifier was reproducing accurately frequencies below where certain speaker cabinets can handle it, they decided, well, it might be a good idea if we can make a speaker cabinet that can deal with these sort of things. So that was when the SWR Goliath series, the 410, started coming out. And the line has grown, to all sorts of directions. Here, let me just show you what I'm standing in front of here. This is a Goliath Junior 3 210. The juniors came around in the late 80s, for people who wanted something a little bit smaller for, small jazz gigs, caveats gigs, stuff like that. This particular, the latest edition handles 350 watts, as opposed to the Goliath 3, the 410, which handles 700. This on the bottom is our basic two-way, and this handles 250 watts. It's a 15. It's the extension for this combo amp that you're standing right in front of. The basic black. It's a 160 watt combo amp with a 15-inch tweeter.
Who's bass?
But yeah, we've got catalogs here. Thanks, Charlie.
Bass player? Guitar. Oh, this. All right.
That's all right.
It's all right. I won't. But
Yeah, give it to you. All play in bands, so you can give it to your bass player.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what happens. See, there you go. Tell your bass player to go get some of this gear.
All right.
We'll get to them one way or the other. Damn it. So anyway, that's kind of the history of SWR, and Charlie just disappeared. I was just going to ask him something as well. But anyway, let me open it up for questions right now, because I'm at that mental state where I'd like some audience responses. About my thought process a little bit. Does anybody have any questions about the gear? Or questions they want to ask me? Set up. Questions for Mike? Questions for me? Anything?
I'm curious how you actually got endorsed by them. Did you approach them, or did they approach you?
They're still the kind of company that they are approached. It's not like they're actively, seeking out people all the time. In this case, I approached them, and to be perfectly honest, the first time I approached them, they said no.
Okay.
And then I approached them again a few months later, and then the whole thing got worked out. But I mean, I paid for all my gear. It's not even Marcus Miller paid for his redhead. So it's not it's the kind of situation. And it helps facilitate the kind of relationship where the people who are working with them really are working with them and not just trying to get their name in an ad or scamming free gear or something like that just because that was the first, best, quickest thing that was available.
Right.
Which does happen in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Charlie, do you have any questions for me?
I couldn't hear everything you were saying, so I'm not sure.
Oh, I just asked if anybody had any questions about it.
What's a head like that run?
What is this list for?
It's got
Charlie?
$10.99.
This list for $13.99.
Well, actually, no, it's $12.99 now. It was $13.99.
$12.99.
I just went down to $12.99.
Here it's available for $10.39.
Actually, I can do a little better.
Yeah, yeah. It just
$80.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. Just tell Dave that Brian said you could get it for like $300.
Is that the same strat you used on Sam's Universe?
Yeah, it's been totally tweaked ever since then. It's got new tuners, new pick guard, new pickups, a new bridge. Well, it's my favorite guitar. It's the only. I wouldn't say the only one, but I communicate best with this guitar.
What are your guys' thoughts on helping people dial in their music or dial in their sound?
Helping.
Well,
I mean, advice.
I think it's a little bit different for guitars than basses. I mean, with guitar, most likely you're plugging into an amplifier where you're trying to get some sort of overdriven gain preamp circuit. And once you get that kind of sound, then you're adjusting master volume to taste. And a lot of guitarists are going to have problems with dirty sounds if they don't drive the gain hard enough. So it becomes a real guessing game. I'm not as up. I know that it's much different for the mentality of trying to dial in a guitarist sound is almost diametrically opposite as trying to dial in a bassist sound because guitarists are naturally looking for distortion. And bassists, in general, are not. I mean, some bassists have distortion units and everything, but it becomes, you can see all the problems that they run into because it ends up cutting the lower frequencies. So, in general, the deal with this is to try and reproduce the most accurate, to get the most accurate reproduction of this sound of your bass possible. And in order to do that on an amplifier like this, you would change the master volume down all the way to nothing. And then, say, you play your hardest note and adjust the preamp gain, which is the knob all the way here on the left. And keep turning it up until you saw that red light coming on here. That means you're clipping the preamp. And that's not going to sound good on a bass. It may sound good on a Marshall or a Fender or a Boogie, but it's not going to sound good in here, I can guarantee you. So what you want to do is just duck underneath that, or even further underneath that, depending on how much of the tube sound that you want, and then adjust your master volume to whatever you want. Pardon the buzz right here. I think it has to do with the fluorescent lights. Okay. Now with a guitarist, I mean, how do you dial in the sound on your amp? It's probably completely different.
I just move things until it sounds okay.
Yeah, I mean, as far as, are you guitarist or bassist? Okay. I mean, you have to deal with, you have separate amps for clean and dirty? Yeah, I mean, that's tough when you're trying to go back and forth in one amp between a clean and dirty sound. It's trying to get the gain structure to balance out is not always an easy thing. It's a whole completely different world.
And it's different in every room and on every stage, and with every group of musicians that you're with, depending on the gear that they're using, because the sound picture you're trying to paint is one of balanced frequencies. You want to try to, you don't want a bunch of people middling around in the same frequency. You want to try to have everybody placed on shelves in a frequency store, and that's a challenge, and it's pretty much impossible when you're touring because you only have like a minute and a half for sound check.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, another thing is that with guitarists, almost in every instance, I can't think of an instance where this wouldn't happen unless it was a really special situation. They cabinet is mic'd. So you're trying to get a sound out of your cabinet, and that sound that's coming out of your speaker cabinet is going directly to the house. Whereas with bass, sometimes that's not always the case. I mean, what's good for your sound on stage, what you want to hear, is not necessarily the best thing for the house, especially in the 200, 300 frequency range, around the low A, from the low A from the open string all the way up to D. Some of that low mid stuff where bassists just love that punch, and you can feel it right in front of you. When that gets out in the house, it's not cool. So you have the option on the XLR out in this thing to send either a completely direct signal, so that the house can decide what's best for the house, as opposed to you deciding what's best for the house and just kind of being Nazi about it. Or you can put it into a line position, in which case you do get the EQ from your amp, and if the house likes it, then that's cool. Scott, do you have something to say?
SWR.
Yeah.
That's a solid
SWR
statement.
would be on the store.
Yeah, that's right.
So all the cool, everything's ironed out real nice.
Right. Okay. Great. We also have some merchandise for sale up there, don't we?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Some of the Mike Keneally fine T-shirts and CDs and hats and all sorts of other. Sorry. Yeah. We've got merchandise up there in case anybody's interested in such a thing, and we're playing at the Khyber Pass tonight in case some people weren't here when I began. I think our set time is 11:30 p.m.
Okay.
It's fairly late, but it's a Friday.
No.
Or that already happened.
No,
No.
we're playing with. See, a lot of people think Project Object is Ike's band. It's not. He just sits in with the Nichols. Yeah, we play with Project Object a couple. Yeah, we played with Project Object a couple of nights ago.
Is that David Torrance? David Torrance project?
No, it's wow. It's funny how it just becomes like a goulash of information. We played with. Okay, did you guys play in the Steely Dan?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we played with Project Object, which is this Jersey-based Zappa cover group,
Which has played with Ike Willis
which
on
has played
occasion.
with Ike Willis on occasion. Okay, that's thing one.
That's one
A
thing.
couple nights ago, we played with the Knitting Factory in New York City with David Torn. He played solo. That's
he
thing
played
two.
solo.
Last night we played with the Steely Dan cover group called the Steely Dan.
Okay.
That's thing three. They're all distinct. And then tonight we're playing at the Khyber Pass with.
God,
I don't know.
all those people we just mentioned, it's going to be one big jam.
Can Torn really play solo with all those loops and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, it's magic.
He's
Yeah.
funny. He's
Totally
great.
happy.
And the coolest thing about it is that it takes an hour and a half to get his shit off the stage.
I watched him
Okay.
put it into his truck
Right.
right outside the Knitting Factory. It takes a good 40 minutes.
Let's play something else, and then
Alright.
we'll talk tech.
Okay.
And
So you
then
want
we'll
to
play something else.
want to do the Cowlogy?
Yeah, sure. Or do you want to do that last?
Who said car song? You said car
Ooh.
song.
Yeah, sure.
Our friend Jay, he says I didn't do it a lot.
Okay, what's it going to be?
Well, somebody just said Desired Effect, somebody else said car song. You don't want to play Desired Effect with this little. You want it?
Actually, this would be pretty cool.
Well, let's try Desired Effect.
What do you think? While you're tuning them
And then we'll play I Will into the
For all the acclaim and adoring its fame, you'll never forsake us, we're building a dream. Never betray me, an art and a pain. I'm proud of you staying with me. Wash me clean and make me whole when I get wet. Kiss my mouth and eyes. I beg you to protect. Give me the desire of it. I heard with love for you, wash me clean and make me whole when I get wet. Kiss my mouth and I beg you to protect. Give me the desire of
What time it is?
It is 10:04.
10:04. Perfect time. Talk a little bit, play a little bit. All right, we done.
Get on something.
Yes. Who in here understands the relationship between power ratings and impedances? I see a hand back there, all the way back there. Oh, Scott. So, does anybody understand the relationship between power ratings and impedances? Okay, this is important. In general, bass players need to have 3 to 4 times the amount of power in order to keep up with a guitar's power, so that they'll have the same perceived volume. Because guitars' frequencies are so mid-rangey and they cut through so easily, and not only that, but it takes twice as much power to amplify lower frequencies to begin with. So you really need to have a lot of power in order to keep up with someone who's got a really loud guitar rig. And if you're wondering why your 200 watts can't keep up with their 100 watts, that's part of the reason. So there's a couple ways you can go about it. So right here we have, this right here is an SM400, and it's a stereo power amp, which means there's 2 power amps inside this one unit. And what you can do is you can either run them in stereo, each separately, or you can bridge them together to get one big, huge mono power amp. And in this case, I'm running it in stereo. Now, the deal is, everybody's heard of ohms, right? Okay, you got 8 ohm cabinets, you got 4 ohm cabinets. some people talk about heads, they say, oh, it's an 8 ohm head, or it's a 4 ohm amp, or whatever. That's not the way that it works. Amplifiers are not rated at impedances. Speakers are. An amplifier will deliver power at whatever impedance it sees from its speaker cabinet that's hooked up to it, okay? So if a power amp is hooked up to an 8 ohm speaker cabinet, it'll deliver power at 8 ohms. If it's hooked up to a 4 ohm speaker cabinet, it'll deliver power at 4 ohms, okay? Now, impedance, or ohms, which is the way you measure impedance, equals resistance to power. So, if a power amp can deliver 300 watts at 8 ohms, then it can deliver more at 4 ohms. Say, not double, but maybe 450 watts at 4 ohms. Now, power amp may like it better at a certain impedance. You know, say power amp, you may want to get the most power out of your power amp that you want, you know. So you say, oh, well, if the impedance is lower and it delivers more power, I'll just keep dropping the impedance until there's no impedance and the power amp can deliver as much power as it can possibly deliver. Well, that's great, except amplifiers have minimum impedances. And if you try and make the amplifier deliver power at too low an impedance, sure, it'll give you the 1,000 watts that you're looking for, but it'll only last for like a couple minutes before it blows itself to smithereens. So what you need to do is find out what your amplifier's minimum impedance is when you're building a rig, and then try and maximize that amplifier's potential by matching up speaker cabinets with it. This Goliath Junior 3 right here is a 4 ohm enclosure, okay? Now, like I said, there's stereo power amps in here. So the one side of its stereo power amp can deliver 250 watts into this box here. And the box handles 350 watts, so you're set. The other side of the power amp, or the other power amp if you will, is delivering into this box down here, and this is 8 ohms. So it can only get 150 watts into this box down here. So this is going to be louder than this. But the nice thing about the SM400 is that you can deliver power to cabinets of different impedances. It's okay. A lot of people think that if you have an 8 ohm cabinet and a 4 ohm cabinet and you combine them off the same power amp or the same amplifier, that you're going to run into a lot of trouble. With some amps, yeah. With this amp, no. Okay? Now, does anyone know what happens when you combine cabinets of certain impedances?
They're in parallel, it cuts it, here's the impedance in half.
Right, exactly. And what happens if they're in series?
Yeah.
They add, that's right. Well, for all intents and purposes, when you're hooking up speakers to an amplifier, you're in parallel. Okay? The act of taking a speaker cable and going from the amp to the cabinet and then to the other cabinet, that is not series. That's a big misnomer out there. Series is when you start screwing around with the positives and the negatives, and it's a big, you don't want to go there. So you're running it in parallel. 2 8 ohm cabinets will give you a total resulting impedance of 4. 2 4 ohm cabinets will give you a total resulting impedance of 2. Does anybody know what an 8 ohm and a 4 ohm will combine to make?
6.
2.6.
2.6.
It goes lower. It's there's a mathematical equation that equals it all out. If I knew it, I would tell you what it is, but I don't. I just know that 8 and 4 equals 2.6. Now, if your minimum impedance for your amplifier is 4 ohms, and it's a mono power amp, which means there's not 2 power amps in here, and you want to combine them off the same power amp, you want to use this cabinet, you want to use this cabinet, you can't. Okay? Because your amplifier will overheat and blow things up. Okay? Who are the bass players in the room? Any? There we go.
Part-time.
1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. All right. Just so you know, if you know your guitarist here, you could have raised your hand and you might have gotten a T-shirt out of it. But now it looks like it's only going to be the bass players after this whole thing is over. So there you go. Charlie, is there anything you want to add before we?
You tell them you can use that as a preamp and not even worry about plugging in speakers?
Yeah, that's also true. A load is not, you don't have some amplifiers you have to have a speaker cabinet or you have to have a load on the amplifier. This amplifier is not like that. You can run this just as a preamp. You can use it in the studio. You can run an XLR line out. You don't have to have any speakers hooked up to it, and nothing bad will happen to the amplifier. And I know definitely that there are amplifiers on the market where that is not the case. Also, yeah, that's right.
Tubes, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you wanted, like I said, if you wanted to use it as a preamp to a separate power amp in your rig, you could use the mono effect send out of the back. So you have a 1/4 inch out and an XLR line out, depending on what kind of purpose you're using it for, and you don't have to have a speaker cabinet hooked up to it. So we're going to play one more long song, and then we're going to be done. Again, I just want to thank Mike, and I want to thank Jason. Dave, hey, there's the guy who put the whole thing together.
He's
Dave,
Siberian.
thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Everybody clap for Dave. Damn it, clap now. Is there,
Totally embarrassed.
is there anything you want to add?
No, just thanks for everybody for coming, and thank you guys.
No.
This was great and wonderful turnout.
Cool. Great. Yeah. No. It's going great. Okay.
So you want to do I Will into the Cowlogy? Is that what's going on?
Yeah. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. He said.
Yeah. Exactly. Or do you want to do something else?
No, that's fine. Let's just make sure I'm in tune. If I can avoid being stung by a bee, I will. If I can avoid being killed by a tree, I will. The pain of dentistry is a pain I know real well. And if I can avoid being stung by a bee, I will. I will. And if I can avoid being stung by a bee, I will. And when the ground goes under, the buildings tumble down, and you'd rather go to sleep because the cloud. Whoa there, boy! And the weather's really decent and they have good rides. You can jump on the bucket cushion when it's in the midst of the cloud. The state leak. Time to sweat my friend is now. It's so heavy, it's now the day of the cow. The boss stands and fighting down amidst the ruins, instead find the case of humans from a bad possibility. You can jump on the one, but it's the day of the cow. I'll speak to you as a man who has eaten more meat than you could shake it and just understand the road you stand. I accept my fiery fate on this day of top of the chain now. Consider for the edges and the over the menstrual gown. See the cage. The cow may have all the she's not operate in the realm of the sophisticated. And has she the capacity to distinguish Miss Muffin and me, and have the bacon in the boothery? You're out of town. Watch it turn to next to the cow. Despite one's best intentions, we might already believe so the monkey see is hiding out his party's out for me. You can jump all you want, but it's the day of the cow.
Mike Keneally, Jason Smith, thank you SWR, thank you Westchester Music. We have merchandise at the front counter for sale. Please don't forget about that. And also those bass players who I pointed to, I think I have a little something for you possibly. So it could be me. I think I have a little something for you. But anyway, thank you all very very, very much for coming, and don't forget to come to the Kyber Pass tonight. Thank you.
11,
Bye.
11:30?
11:30.
Take it.
Yes.
That's great.
Thanks.
Oh, that's nice, man. Road friendly. That's good.
Yeah, I know.
What's that?
Really sweet.
Road friendly.
That's
good.
it. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna bring that
Yeah.
onto this thing. What's that? Yes, exactly.
Which camera, man?
Not in the car. I'm tired. I'm hungry.
There.
And I figured somebody else.
It's hot here. Very. Let's go out there. Cool.
It's too small and you're not the ones who brought earlier. I was gonna tell you guys.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we got some brand new shit.
That's so cool.
Yeah, get what you guys.
Hard.
Here.
Couple of days until I saw you.
We
were in New York City.
Right.
Hot. And my feet were killing me, and I had to get sandals. And
You're in South
the gig that I really wasn't into until like 4 a.m. last night. Craziness.
Life on the road, huh? Oh, sorry, Thomas.
You
Stuff.
copy of
Got it in the glove box.
you are my master of puppets.
SWR, speaking I got. Is that cool? Okay, cool. There you go. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, dumped it off late last night. In between a few beers.
Oh. What's that?
Yeah, I drowned my sorrows in drink last night too.
Oh, sure.
The horrible thing about it was that
Oh,
this place,
no,
the bar bat that we were at,
Right.
it was like $8 to drink. Really spending too much.
Yeah, you wanted from Cuz of Breakfast, right? From Cuz of Breakfast on.
You're the man. Hey, where's this gonna wind up, do you think?
What's that?
Are you gonna like be trading this tape out or something?
If if it's okay with them.
Because the last Clinic I tape, I'm thinking of
Head over there now.
Good job.
since I'm the only I'm probably the only person who has access who will ever see that tape unless I offered it. I'm thinking of putting together like short clinics and stuff, just the songs, and just having a compilation tape that offers a bonus if a person were to make a large purchase. Possible deal that's coming up with videos.
Right.
Be interesting.
Nah, I could always keep it under wraps.
I guess I really enjoy all aspects of percussion.
Bring some earplugs.
I might. Thanks for playing Desire Attack.
No problem.
I can die now.
Okay, well, you can hear it again tonight, probably. Yeah, that was nice.
Sluggo shirt, please.
Hey. I don't know. It's kind of large to me.
Give me an extra. Can always shrink into it. Cool.
I haven't. I used to do columns for Guitar Player, and I'm actually really starting to seriously think about a book. So I think maybe when I get off this tour, I'll start working on a book, and hopefully I'll get a video out next year too. Yeah.
I just started going to the University of Philadelphia. Started the jazz thing. I'm just incredibly challenged. I came up in Marshall, big like guitar player. Right.
Did anybody get the special one yet? I got 707, but
I don't think we know which one.
Yeah, 25.
I see.
Unlock.
I know Scott does.
Take care, man. Good to see you. Yeah.
I saw a real player playing. I almost understood.
Well, it's just like a glimpse, of what's possible.
Oh man, but I'm telling you, I tell these guys all the time. I come in if I hear on the phone, like, all right, help me quit my days. Study all day.
I quit my day job. It's a lot of people that cry, that plaintive cry.
Well, that day job could be worse, I suppose.
Yeah.
I do computer, so it helps me in music with MIDI and sequencing and things like that.
That's
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bring the band.
Sure, Mike.
Yeah, I'll sign you straight.
Guys aren't going on until 11:30 tonight,
I know.
huh?
It's absurd.
Follow it till you pass the university, you're on the right, you get to the Parkway Shopping Center on the left.
You like that, huh? Shit, you ruined my existence, man. I'll see you tonight.
All right. Thanks for coming out. Thanks
Thanks.
for taping this. I appreciate
No
it.
problem. You want copies,
love
or
it.
even if you want to use some masters, I'll send them there.
Well, good, I'm glad.
Turned out pretty good.
See you this evening.
You got it. Take care.
You too.
Beller.
Beller.
Later. See you tonight, man.
I'll see you tonight, man. You're trooper number 1 so far.
Sign for me.
Now?
Yeah. He's leaving. Swinging right.
Wherever you like. You want a copy of this, let me know. I'll get it to you.
Scott? Hold on a second. Hey, Scott Chatfield, where's the truck parked?
Way over there. I'm gonna.
I hardly
It's around the corner, so let me see if I can.
Anybody else want anything? Brian, hold on. Does anybody else want Anybody else? No.
Thanks, dude.
No problem.
I'll see you tonight, man.
All right. I'll see you there.
Hey, Brian.
See ya.